Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I am Shogun. Today we have a special episode on plant teachers, entheogens or ethnogens, psychedelics, shamanic journeys, and all that fascinating stuff with my good friend Technoshaman, formerly known as In the Dryer, and other monikers, but we'll call him Technoshaman. Before we get started, please make sure you follow and subscribe on YouTube and BitChute, where you will find over 200 Roundtable podcast episodes on all kinds of subjects, including past episodes with Technoshaman that were excellent. And also make sure you join the Roundtable Discord server, where, of course, we record this podcast every day at 8 p.m. Central and other times as well. And you can find links to all of our social media, like our Gilded server, and much more. So that being said, welcome Technoshaman. Thanks for joining me. How are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to introduce everyone to an interesting concept about plant teachers. I'm pretty sure that they impacted civilization's development because we'll start with cannabis as the first topic of discussion. This plant has over 10,000 years of evolutionary history of coevolution with Homo sapiens, and I don't think it's any coincidence that it arises around the time that civilization started. And then there's a couple of points that indicate to such. We are evolutionarily modern at about 120,000 years ago. But the changes involved in civilization required us to develop and adapt to new models of living faster than evolution could cope. So we found tools in the plant world to allow us to adapt to the needs of civilization. And cannabis was one of the first tools available to Homo sapiens. And it allows us to provides both physical and, as importantly, psychological needs to humanity. For example, cannabis and its close cousin hemp are able to produce the essential amino acids and are one of the few plants able to do so. And this is not a coincidence. It's an indication of coevolution, in my opinion.
Okay, so we will dive into this. Do you want to just elaborate on that, basically? Coevolution. What do you think it means?
It indicates that this plant did as much for us as we did for it. It's to the point where it's available under once draconian systems, and yet it fulfilled so many psychological needs that it was able to sustain itself. Yet it was able to allow us to meditate and incorporate new ideas into our paradigms and allow us to adapt to the changing needs of civilization and the pressures that they put on us as humans adapting to the needs of society and the society adapting to the needs of humans. And this comes about during the agricultural revolution. And cannabis is an old world plant. So it comes from the same realm as the Fertile Crescent, or it comes from India, which is one of the centers of civilization, which had communication with the Fertile Crescent. And these civilizations, there's evidence around the Ganges River of civilizations that had drainage patterns and sewage systems and all sorts of stuff. And our number system comes from India, and these allow us to think in novel ways to meet the changing needs of society. And I think it's important that there's this long history of human usage, and it should continue. And and it fulfills a need in the population. And yeah, not to mention the old might as well mention the old popular American article where hemp and cannabis have been found to have been $1 billion crop, and it's it allows production of bioplastics. It prevents cancer through the initiation of apoptosis of damaged cells. It provides all of these needs. It may prevent cancer. Smokers who or smoke cigarettes and cannabis at the same time were found to have lower rates of lung cancer than those who smoke tobacco alone. So it's interesting that it has these properties, and it's finally being the information's getting out to the masses, and I hope this helps a little bit in that process. These are important tools for healing people.
So we're going to open it up also for audience participation pretty quickly here, but one question I want to ask you is, what do you believe about like entities? People on DMT often account that they experience contact with entities, right? What seem like aliens or spirits that they think are real. And there's sort of the idea that they exist independently of being not just a phenomenon of a drug trip that you're having, but that they somehow independently exist apart from the person using the drugs. So I just was wondering, what do you think about that? Right? Do you believe in spirits, for lack of a better word, or do you think they're just part of the drugs?
I think they're more than just a psychoactive phenomenon. Yeah, just in my experiences with dealing with all sorts of strange situations I've been in. Yeah, I utilize a more technologically based entheogen, hence my name, Technoshaman. I'm going to get into more modern psychoactives later in the podcast, but I'll mention my interest in DXM right now. I've experienced moving 2 feet along the floor of the room I was staying in when I was partially asleep on one of the experiences, and I've experienced lights and other objects, and I don't know what to make of it. I don't know the mechanism of action. I'm not going to pretend to know, but it seemed to be more than the self. But that's the interesting tangential note.
Okay. So I do want to open it up now for anyone in the audience who might want to ask questions or make comments at any time. Feel free. If not, I have plenty more that I will continue on with. But does anyone have a question?
I do. Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
Okay.
Hey, Technoshaman, thank you so much for being here, and really appreciate it. My question to you is, how do you feel about the hyper-engineering of marijuana and increasing the THC components?
I believe it messes with the balance of it. Yeah, the older, more organic forms have a better balance. It seems to have messed with the effects it has, and the balanced cannabinoids are more akin to what we've been dealing with throughout evolutionary history, and so react with humans better. I find in my experience.
Oh, great.
Great question, man.
So let's talk about dextromethorphan a little bit, because I know that this is like your biggest interest in terms of drugs and in a sense overall. I've known you for a long time. You're an old good friend of mine. And I'm a big fan, obviously, of you. But I know that one of your things that you're really interested in is dextromethorphan, what they call robo tripping, right? Because from Robitussin, robo tripping. Robitussin is a cough syrup, and there's two different kinds of cough syrup that are recreationally used. One is dextromethorphan syrups, like what Technoshaman uses, which is in the dissociative family, like ketamine or PCP. And then the other one is scissor or syrup, which is codeine cough syrup, which is what's popular with the rap crowd and people like Lil Wayne. So very expensive, different kind of drug. But I don't have much experience with dextromethorphan. I took it once or twice as a like pharmaceutically pure form of it, but I never could because I hate the taste of cough syrup. It's like I
it's just very bitter.
But let me just ask you, like, let's have a little interview about this. When did you first discover robo tripping? How old were you, and how'd that happen?
I was quite young. I was in a phase where I was starting to think for myself, and I had access to the old internet before the walled garden phenomenon, and found information about. I found the DXM fact, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is awesome! Let's experiment with this." And it's been a part of my life for more years than more years as a part of my life than my life without it. It's been interesting ride. It allowed me to see the world in a way that it expands beyond the three dimensions that we are normally aware of, and into the hyperspatial dimensions, as I like to put it. One of the first sensations was noticing a weird understanding of the sense of gravity, where I felt like I was on a roller ball and moving about the world by tilting the world, and you gain this. It's not for everyone, because some people have bad experiences with it, but some people like it but won't do it again, and some people love it. It's a powerful experience, and I think it goes back to John C. Lilly and his research with ketamine in the 70s. He would go into sensory deprivation tanks, and he thought he could telepathically communicate with dolphins, and I think there's evidence of that in his work, especially with the recordings of dolphins and whatnot. And yeah, he did some wild stuff, and he came up with the idea of echo, Earth Coincidence Control Office, where you control your short-term coincidences, but it controls your long-term coincidences. And I think that's akin to I don't like to utilize angel demon mentality for much, but yeah, it seems to be like the scientifically quantifiable way of describing the angel side, and then demon side is how he described solid state intelligence, which was to show that its power was able telepathically told him that it's going to cause this airplane to land early, and shut down the entire air traffic control system of LAX, and caused them to have an early landing. So that's an indication of the intelligence is working outside of the Earth, and at a cosmic level. We're just a cosmic chessboard in a sense.
So just going to remind everyone that the microphone is open, so anybody at any time who has a question or comment can ask. But in the interim, what do you think, and this might seem like a stoner way to approach this, right? But what do you think is the nature of consciousness? What is the relationship between consciousness and reality, right? Because I know you and I know these questions, right? So in other words, what I'm getting at is when you take dextromethorphan or Robitussin or DMT or whatever, and you have a perceptual journey, to what extent does that perceptual journey have ontological or epistemological value? Meaning, to what extent does it correspond what you perceive on the one hand with what you can know epistemologically and what is real ontologically? So in other words,
I've experienced some serious physical effects with dextromethorphan, to the point where I had a TV that you had to press the wrong buttons to get into the menu and whatnot. Then when I was in the middle of the trip, the button started working correctly. All of a sudden, there's issues with passwords not working, then all of a sudden working. And there's issues with all of a sudden phenomenon where you have a jacket that's one direction and then you're not paying attention and then you look back and the jacket's flipped out upside down on you. Shit like that. It has happened. Which you get to the point where is this some sort of type of Roy game in Blips and Chips and Rick and Morty? Are you familiar with that that episode of Rick and Morty?
I watched the show, but I don't remember that episode offhand right now.
They went to a hyperdimensional arcade where basically you live a life in this video game, and they see how well you live that life. And yeah, I start to wonder whether this life is a type of Roy. You play the character of Roy in this video game, and his basic life is he owns a carpet store and whatever, and you have a family and whatnot. Yeah, but Rick, of course, was taking him off grid. Yeah, that was a good episode.
I have a comment. So was your first experience with dextromethorphan, was that in a like a cough syrup form? And then my comment was I remember I had some friends one time, they had asked me to go into a store, hey, and grab like 4 bottles of Robitussin DM, make sure it's the DM. And you know how it is. I had internet access back then too. The funny thing is we went and saw Marilyn Manson concert.
Oh wow!
And we're robo tripping, and younger, we're teenagers, right? And we were running back and forth up on the stage and jumping off and crowd surfing and just all over the place. It was funny because I remember one of our friends threw up behind a bunch of cops, and it was just like, it's blood red, and it literally freaked them out. They were trying to call an ambulance for him, and I went into the bathroom, and there was this. I mean, he was legit had this guy on the phone, and I couldn't even make it to the toilet. I don't throw up in toilets anyway. It's gross. I hit the sink. I couldn't hit the trash can, so I hit the sink, and it just looked like I puked a whole stomach full of blood. The look on his face. He's like, his eyes get so big. He was on the phone. He's like, man, you all right? I'm much better now.
Man.
But yeah, there's a couple
experience.
There's a couple plateaus. I mean, the only thing you have to, from what I understand, acetaminophen can be an issue. There's different
absolutely.
plateaus.
That's important to talk about.
But I think that the effects on the myoboid receptors was worth research and a study, and certainly any guidelines and common sense. But yeah, was that your first experience? Was by the Robitussin DM method?
Yeah, the good old cherry menthol syrup. Oh man, chase
it with a Coca-Cola.
Something like that.
That's what the instructions. I remember I had I used to run BBSs, and that was one
sweet.
of that was one of the docs that used to get thrown around, and we all looked at it and thought it was a LARP and kind of more of a joke. And then I actually had a couple of my friends at school be like, yeah, man, if you never robo tripped, man, you're missing out. I learned my lesson on it. You know what I'm saying? It to me, I when we were at the concert, I got a little bit of a heart palpitation, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take it easy on this, and so that's my limited experience.
Wow. Yeah, it's one thing to be careful of is the acetaminophen added in some of the combination products. That's nothing to mess with. My buddy grabbed the wrong product and nearly got hurt from that. But I pointed that out, and yeah, he got the treatment. But yeah, most of the time you just be careful. But yeah,
awesome.
DXM only. Is what you. But yeah, it's an interesting experience. Not for everybody, of course, but
so following up
It's
on that
it's
with
powerful experience. It's something should not be taken lightly.
so
It's a
as a
powerful
follow,
entheogen.
if you can hear me, Techno, is just this, right? So, do you believe that the DXM experience, where you have these journeys and spiritual experiences on DXM, is a spiritual experience? In other words, does it correlate to spiritual reality, right? So, if you take DXM and you see like an Egyptian god like Osiris or Set, right? Or a Greek god like Zeus, do you think that means something, like it's spiritually real? Or do you think that because it's from the cough syrup, it isn't real? Like, all I'm trying to assess is, do you think that the cough syrup is a shamanic substance that actually takes you to a real spiritual dimension?
I think
Or
it
is it
bridges the
creating the illusion of that?
I think it bridges the gap between the two. It's definitely technological because it requires the dextrorotary molecule of a. There's no real NMDA antagonists in nature, so it requires a certain level of technological sophistication to be able to develop in the first place. Not to mention, it was also created by CIA and naval intelligence, which is an interesting past bit, right in the height of the MK Ultra days. So you can have an indication of its power through that alone.
All right. And have you yourself done DMT as well?
I've done something akin to it, a bufotenine, which is more of auditory.
So you've done
Yeah,
bufotenine, which is
yes,
frog venom.
from Yopo. So I noticed a lot of stuff with my auditory system nowadays as a result of that. Hearing stuff in the background and all sorts of stuff.
Dude, I fucking got some cannabis from my dad, right? Hawthorne Waxwing. Send me some homegrown cannabis. And I was like, oh, this doesn't look very good. It's not like good cannabis, like what I usually smoke. So I'll cook it up into edibles. So I cooked it into butter. And I was like, I probably fucked this up, but whatever. And I like took a couple teaspoons. And that night I was hearing, like, literally hearing people talking in my voices, being like, oh
Wow, man.
literally just like doing that in my ears. I was like, well, I can fully hear that right now. So that's a little bit intense. And then literally like fucking like sirens and shit going off, like literally like ambulance sirens, like in my bedroom. I'm like, none of this is real, but like I can totally hear it. It
Oh
was
yeah.
crazy.
So,
Yeah, I've been there before.
Technoshaman, are you saying that the hardest you've ever tripped is on DXM? Is that what you're saying?
There's experiences mixing it with a 5-HT2A agonist that extend beyond that. But yeah, probably my Sigma trips are the most overwhelming. I thought I broke the universe, and so that's like ego death times something, because I thought I broke it for everyone else, and it was down to the last bit, and then I flipped the bit, and the multiverse kicked in and fucking saved the day, and I was like, holy shit. Oh man. But yeah, I guess that's what you got to do if you're trying to if you're trying to flip a bit at the Planck length, something like that would happen.
I also had a friend who said that he had basically tried every substance under the sun, and that the hardest that he had ever tripped was off of DXM. So I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, it can be a powerful experience. Another time I thought I went outside the Matrix, had ego death with Norshan, and I happened to be in a barn and fell on spiked machinery, but it was such a way I had my position in space time was such that it didn't injure me in a critical fashion. It hit my thigh, so I'm grateful for that. And walked outside the Matrix for a little bit, and yeah, that was an interesting experience. And
Larry's in the portal again. What's a good dosage of DXM for a beginner?
I wouldn't go over the second plat. Probably for average weight, 300 milligrams.
Yes, yeah, I won't take it. Like, I won't drink a bottle of cough syrup just to trip out or take a bunch of pills. So I had like pure DXM powder, and I felt enough of it that like it was kind of weird. Like, it had like a weird load to it that
Yeah,
I
it does
didn't.
have a body load.
Yeah, big time. So it's like I could feel it, but I was like, "Oh, that's like very in my body. Like, I don't like that feeling. Like, it's
It's
too."
also critical to point out that it's extremely dangerous to mix it with SSRIs. So if you're on an SSRI such as Zoloft or Prozac, do not mess with DXM.
Yeah, thank you. And I will also say something else, which is that if you have any interest in the kind of experience that you can have from dextromethorphan, consider ketamine, right? Because ketamine is very popular recreationally. It's also prescribed in Canada for medicinal uses, and it is safe and non-addictive and non-toxic and therapeutic. And so I don't deny that dextromethorphan has interesting properties, but I question whether those properties have any value if someone had access to ketamine. And I think ketamine would always be preferable over DXM. So I think DXM is essentially it's a easily available kind of mutant form of ketamine that a lot of people access because they can't get K. But if you can get K, I don't think you should waste any time with DXM.
I think DXM has unique properties due to the length of the experience. Also, it has it's sort of a dirty molecule, so it hits multiple receptors. So there might be a serotonergic effect, and moreover, it also helps reduce tolerance. Low doses are being used in hospitals to prevent people who are in chronic pain from having to increase their dosage of opiates. So that's an interesting property of it. It reduces tolerance in people.
Can I throw something out there real quick? It is can interact with SSRIs, SSREs, SSRNs, and MAOIs. The dopamine release, I think, compared to ketamine, maybe a little bit different. Like I said, a little bit of different molecule length. The what was it? 5% of people don't even process.
Yeah, they're slow metabolizers.
Yeah,
and they'll have an extended experience and have to be prepared for that. That's why starting out below 300 milligrams is advisable.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, that's where the warning comes, is that if you're within that group, you got to be careful with the amount that you take because it's going to obviously stay in your system longer. I had them do a clinical trial.
Oh wow!
Of a ketamine and lidocaine infusion in the hospital. I woke up connected to ketamine. And I said, well, why you got me hooked up to horse tranquilizer? They said, well, we're doing a clinical trial. And I said, I don't remember signing anything. I started seeing, very vivid tracers. And I was like, this is a little bit much. And they turned it down some. And then, interestingly, the lidocaine infusion, the lidocaine side got messed up. And it left the ketamine on. I said,
oh wow.
Just leave the ketamine on. I said, well, we can't do that. Let me try and fix it. And I don't know if, I think she may have tried to fix it, but either way, I was able to continue just on the ketamine side. I had one of the most vivid, most beautiful dreams of one of the most beautiful motorcycles I could ever imagine in my life. As far as its pain, as far as its ability to mitigate pain, I think that's questionable. I believe it depends on the type of pain. Obviously musculoskeletal versus nerve and atrophy and things like that might be part of it. But yeah, I think that it has a function and a purpose. I think you're right. It does have a little bit of a separate use case. But at the end of the day, the main thing that I would caution, and I hear the most, is that things that are obtained from unscrupulous sources you should always question, because there are unfortunately people that are putting substances in things on purpose, and so just always exercise caution.
Repeat yourself in like 10 words or newer. Let's go.
DEA is pretty clear about people putting fentanyl in things purposely so people die.
Damn.
Oh,
okay.
I want to point something out about this real quick because it isn't mentioned nearly enough. So imagine this, right? If I wanted, well, I'm not going to say if I wanted to, but if somebody wanted to kill somebody, all they would have to do is put a fentanyl or fentanyl analog into a drink, a beverage, something they smoked or something they touched, and that person would then die. And then whatever the forensic toxicology that was done on that person would be that they died of a fentanyl overdose or of an opiate related overdose, which means that in like 90+% of cases that there would be no murder investigation, right? So in other words, if I wanted to kill somebody, or if John Doe wanted to kill somebody, and he just introduced fentanyl poisoning as the way in which he caused the murder, there's like an 80 to 90% chance that there would be no investigation into the murder that he had carried out, because it would automatically be ruled a opiate overdose and therefore not worthy of any moral or forensic significance. So what I'm telling you is there is certainly, like I can guarantee it, there was a huge wave of murders carried out with fentanyl analogs that were never investigated, were never identified, and were never included in any kind of statistics, because anybody with two brain cells to rub together realized that you can just fentanyl poison anybody you want, frame them as a heroin fiend, and nobody gives a damn.
And
So
this has been
I
done
literally
before.
think there is like thousands upon thousands of murders that have been carried out through fentanyl poisoning.
This has been done before with with the introduction of methanol into spirits during the prohibition. It's been done before, so it's something to be aware of. I'd like to move the topic towards ketamine clinics, since we brought up ketamine, and those are I think in stage 3 clinical trials. Ketamine clinics are being found to almost act as a vaccine against depression, where people for 2 weeks to a month afterwards they get instant relief from their treatment-resistant depression, and are found to be in a better state for weeks afterwards. It's amazing treatment, and it should be brought into mainstream practice, I feel. Because depression is such an issue, and ketamine clinics are a solution. I'd also like to bring up the research related to MDMA and PTSD. That's at stage 3 clinical trials. And the study found that 20% responded to that. They used an active control, and because of the physiological effects of MDMA are noticeable. So they used 30 milligrams for the active control, and they used 120 milligrams for the active dose. And they found 60% of people found relief from their PTSD at the active dose, while only 20% at the active control dose. So it's showing amazing treatment, and our veterans deserve treatment for their PTSD, and we need to move forward as quickly as possible with these treatments, these treatment options available for people suffering from depression, suffering from PTSD. Psychedelics and entheogens are the solution, and we need to move forward with that.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about that, right? So I'm Canadian, and in Canada, we actually are fortunate because we have legal prescription ketamine, right? So you can actually get something called desketamine, I think, and it's a nasal spray. And, it's for severe treatment-resistant depression or bipolar depression. And I fully believe this can save my life one day, right? Because the thing is, for me, I'm bipolar. And if you're bipolar, you can have suicidal spikes, basically, right? So it's like I might be totally happy on Monday, not a care in the world. And on Tuesday, I'm like, time to kill yourself. And it's like, you're literally like, it's like that. And so something like ketamine kicks in right away and takes away those suicidal ideations, which, I already know they're more than strong enough to actually make you act on them. And that's why over 80% of bipolar males attempt suicide, and over 50% carry it out, right? Which means I have a less than 1 in 2 chance of survival from my condition. But point
That's
is,
the statistics, man.
That, yeah. So I'm actually pushing for this, right? And I know the first doctor, the second doctor, and so forth, they won't give it to me. They'll be like, no, I haven't heard of that. I don't know about that. That seems weird. But if I just keep insisting, eventually one of them will, and then I'll actually have a little prescription bottle of ketamine that I can literally spritz up my nose if I want to blow my brains out, and that's pretty cool.
That'd be amazing.
The problem is,
I hope that's available to you as soon as possible.
Shogun, it has to be. Ketamine is quite a strong drug. It's a very strong psychiatric drug, and I wouldn't want someone who isn't a medical scientist to sort of to dose someone with that.
Well, they are. They're medical doctors, right? It's a combination of pharmacists and doctors that, prescribe and administer drugs like this, right? So the thing is, they use drugs like SSRI, antidepressants, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, all that stuff, right? That was the older model of treatment for depression. But now we understand a better model of treatment, which is the dissociative anesthetics like ketamine. When you administer them, they have like a profound, lasting effect on depression, which is totally different than how these SSRI antidepressants try and treat them, right? They try and be like, oh, you're low in dopamine or serotonin, so we'll bump that up. And that is terrible. It just causes suicide and homicide and all kinds of shit. But
I
find the patients to be sometimes more.
Can I please finish? Please, Techno? Can I finish?
Leo, you never had a chance to start. You said I didn't let you finish, but you never had a chance to start. You didn't have a turn on the mic.
Well, let me finish. Let me start then.
I'm going to let you have a turn, but first I'm going to finish what I was saying, which is that SSRI antidepressants are the wrong model, and ketamine, like dissociative anesthetic treatment, is a miracle drug for depression. Now go ahead, Leo.
I mean, I know a lot about SSRI medications because I spent most of my 20s on SSRIs. Because in my early 20s, I became very severely depressed, and one thing I can say about SSRIs is it causes addiction to sugars. So the majority of my my 20s, I was addicted to sugars. I was working, but I was also addicted to sugars.
They don't help. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but they were p-value hacked.
Just in general, not just, but just for everybody, one at a time.
Yeah, I mean, so you're talking about, this drug, ketamine, right? It is used in European countries to deal with severe depression. I'm aware of this, but it can't be. You can't. I mean, the drug that the doctors are giving me right now is called metazapine, and that's usually a drug that's administered within a mental hospital because it's a pretty heavy duty antidepressant drug. An SSRI has to be you have to take it for a month or so before it'll even start to work with the patient. But with metazapine and what's the name of that the dissociate again? Ketamine, yeah. With ketamine, they work very quickly. So if someone is like severely depressed, you can give them a dose of metazapine or ketamine, and it will make them better.
The thing with SSRIs is they were p-value hacked. They were data dredged, so that only the positive clinical trials were the ones that made it to publication, while the ones that showed negative results made it in the dustbin of the academic institutions that studied SSRIs.
SSRIs do not work.
SSRIs are pretty insidious because they also cause a type of physical addiction that's awful. sometimes even described worse as the physical addiction of heroin, and yet
No,
they're used in these settings with barely better than placebo results, and yet there's results coming in from ketamine that show statistically significant and strong statistical significant results for depression, yet it's not as available, and I think that's a travesty.
the problem is with the SSRIs, you know, like citalopram and sertraline, drugs like this, and what was the other one called again? The classic old SSRI, was it Prozac?
Fluoxetine? No, that's
No,
still
Prozac. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the fuck.
Yeah, but basically, these. The reason why I don't agree with these drugs is because it takes a month for it to even start working, and the patient can become worse before he or she gets better. That's what I find.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a very efficient drug.
it's efficient for making profits. That's what it's for.
Well, I don't know anything about that.
But even with the ketamine model, I mean, there's still room for capitalism to do its thing, and that, yeah. And I like to see us move forward with it.
But then again, there's a difference between someone who is severely depressed, who are actually genuinely considering committing suicide, and someone who is very unhappy with their life.
I don't know. I just know SSRIs were p-value hacked, and it makes me not trust them.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. If a doctor of medical scientists, doctor of medical science, sorry, genuinely thinks that you are going to kill yourself, then he probably will put you on like ketamine or metazapine or one of these very fast-acting drugs. But if you're someone who's depressed, perhaps a young man who's depressed, then he might put you on these SSRIs, especially if he knows that you're not an alcoholic or a cocaine addict or something like that. Then he probably will put you on an SSRI, like a citalopram or a Prozac or something like that, because you do have time to allow these drugs to happen, these drugs to occur. But if do you know what I'm saying to you? So you have 2 or 3 weeks to allow these drugs to start working, and they do work. These drugs do work. I was on these drugs for years, and they do work. They do cure depression, but when it doesn't cure severe depression. Severe depression is like, I'm actually going to probably in the next couple of days go and kill myself. That's real.
I'd like to move on to the psilocybin studies that have been done at Johns Hopkins. Are you familiar with them?
I don't do that. I'm not going to do that.
Explain it.
Yeah, I'd like to bring them up as terminally ill patients were given psilocybin in a study at Johns Hopkins, and found that they were able to come to terms with what they're facing, crossing over to the other side, in a fashion that aligned with their outlook, and allowed them to be more comfortable with their upcoming prognosis. And moreover, it's been found to be a treatment tool for addiction, which psilocybin has been found to be between 60 to 80% effective for helping addiction to people. And in the middle of an opioid crisis, I think it's a travesty that it's not more available. For example, ibogaine is an underground treatment for opioid addiction, and it's able to reset the opioid receptors while a person goes through a shamanic journey of self-discovery, which may be intense for a lot of people, but it's worthwhile for somebody for going through the rigors of and trials of an opiate addiction, and it should be available to them. I don't know why it's not more available.
Are you talking about Iboga? Iboga?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't have an opiate addiction, but I've heard a lot about the Iboga. It's called what's it called? Iboga, is it?
Ibogaine is the active
Ibogaine.
ingredient.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah, and that has actually cured people of their opiate addiction. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's quite amazing. That amazing.
Yep. And we have these powerful compounds available, and they should see the light of day.
My experience of SSRIs, though, SSRIs, I hope I'm describing that properly. It causes sugar addictions. It causes craving. It causes craving.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that can be the side effects of an excess of serotonin. It's interesting that some of the old antidepressants work by blocking serotonin, so that puts a monkey wrench in the whole serotonergic theory of depression. I think it has more something to do with the endorphin receptors. That's my opinion.
I think it's something to do with the NHS, because I mean, in your country, you have to spend like proper money, don't you, to get these drugs? But in NHS, they just plough these drugs out. The National Health Service, they plough these drugs out because you're a taxpayer. So they do give you the SSRIs, you know, the citaloprams, the Prozacs, all that kind of stuff. It's not adequate. If you could nip it in the bud really quickly, like before putting these people on these drugs for years, you could nip their depression in the bud by just giving them like metazapine. Metazapine is a wonder drug, but for some reason doctors are like, no, we don't give them that. We'll give them the rubbish one.
I don't know, man.
No, I know for a fact, because
I don't know why they do that. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know either. But now they've given me the proper drug. All my problems are completely sorted. Like just from a couple of doses of this metazapine drug. I mean, I don't have a bad life. I've had a pretty good life throughout my 20s, but for some reason I've always had this kind of problem with feeling sad. And the doctors have said, oh, it's depression. So they give me these drugs, like citalopram. I was on citalopram for most of my 20s.
I find bupropion is a pretty good one. It's a DNRI, so it doesn't act on serotonin, and it tends to be a pretty good antidepressant out there for those looking for a readily available antidepressant and trying to find something that actually works.
I mean, I had good 20s. I had good 20s, and the majority of my 20s I was on citalopram. But I had a good life, good, absolutely fine. On and off, I was on this drug called citalopram, and it was the doctors, because basically, when I was early 20s, I got sectioned under the Mental Health Act because I went completely insane. And basically doctors, well, I was on like Librium for a while, lithium, and then they put me on an antidepressant. So the doctor said, oh, it basically boils down to the fact that you're depressed.
Yeah, man.
I was like, okay, fair enough. Carry on. Let me get on with my life.
I hope you get access to a ketamine clinic soon enough, man.
Nah, I'm fine now. Like, this was
Oh, man.
years ago. I'm fine. Seriously, I'm fine.
I hope people who need it get it available to them, along with the PTSD treatment for addiction. That's what I hope. Becomes of
I'm just
the
trying
progress
to.
that people are making in medical research, pharmacology.
I'm just trying to say to you that when it comes to like citalopram and these SSRIs, I know what I'm talking about. Like, I know what they're about, and I know that it shouldn't be. It shouldn't. Well, I suppose everyone's different, aren't they? But it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. Like, there's drugs out there that for some reason these doctors don't want to give to the people.
I
know
don't
why.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that they can help.
Leo, just real quick, how long were you on various SSRIs? Like, how many years in total do you think?
Probably like 7 years, something like that, or more.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing to get off of those. It's horrible.
Oh,
I was on
man.
them for over 13 years, all kinds, like you were describing, including things like trazodone, which it's a fucking nightmare drug. But it is very scary how doctors or medical professionals would throw out these pills, even to children. Like, they tried to get me on amphetamines when I was in the first grade. And it's just obscene.
Sometimes I find patients can have more pharmacological knowledge than doctors. Or
No, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
because they just dig into their nurse's manual and don't actually look into the PubMed articles.
I work in the pharmaceutical industry, and on multiple occasions, the pharmacist would get in contact with the nurse or the doctor, and the doctor would precisely tell the pharmacist not to allow the patient to have the drug that's prescribed for them. The pharmacist then has to deal with the patient. Then, an argument ensues, and then he ends up given filling the drug for the patient regardless, to avoid, getting having to deal with corporate when the patient complains to corporate or whatever. So it's pretty funny because, you prescribe these drugs to patients, they become reliant on them, and now you want to get them off, but you had no plan in the first place to be able to prescribe this drug safely, right, in a safe manner, where the patient doesn't become dependent. The purpose of a drug is not for the patient to take it for the rest of their lives, right? The purpose is to get them into a routine in which they slowly become less reliant on the drug, and now they're capable of living their lives drug-free. But in America, things don't work that way.
SSRIs don't cause dependency, by the way.
Yes, they do. Absolutely, they do.
No, they
It's
don't.
one of the worst dependencies. I completely disagree with you. The physical withdrawal from SSRIs is awful. People get brain
No,
zaps.
it wasn't.
Oh,
Fine.
it was the worst thing
You're-
I've ever experienced in my life,
Right.
having to get off of these medications.
In fact,
if I
Personally,
can,
psychedelics
I'm
helped
sorry.
more than anything. I'm sorry, Shogun, go on.
No,
Yeah, go
well, I didn't mean to cut you off,
No, no.
but this is a very clear point, right? So there are drugs that cause tolerance, dependence, and withdrawal, right? And that's what you call being addicted to something: tolerance, dependence, and withdrawal. And SSRI antidepressants absolutely do cause that, right? So if you've been taking Zoloft, Paxil, or whatever, Wellbutrin for a few weeks or months, your brain has developed a tolerance, a dependence, and a withdrawal. You are addicted to it. It's dependence forming. It's habit forming. Doesn't matter what phrase you want to use to describe it. You're addicted to it. 100%.
Wellbutrin not so much because it works on different receptors, but it does have a mild amount.
Well, the funny part is, right, like, even the Addiction Center of America, for, the one that's responsible for addicts nationwide, even they have now a specific helpline for individuals addicted to antidepressants, right? And I can send you the link for this. And it's funny because the number keeps growing, and we know it's a growing problem, right? That's a separate problem from dependence on ADHD medication, which is a huge issue, by the way. That's in fact one of the biggest economic issues in the pharmaceutical industry in America are ADHD medication. It's a huge fucking problem.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like to address something you mentioned. The goal is drug free. I'd like to point out that it could also be moderation. Moderation is a useful outlook for a lot of people.
Take it from a guy who was on these drugs for like 7 years, right? But you're also talking to a guy who has withdrawed off way worse drugs than SSRIs, you know, like citalopram. And the only withdrawal symptoms I had, just give me a second. The only withdrawal symptoms I had was just a feeling of electric shocks. So I felt like I had like electric shock feelings.
So you had the brain zaps, man. That's
zaps. Yeah, zaps. Yeah, but that's nothing compared to other drugs.
A lot of people indicate that the brain zaps are worse than withdrawing from heroin. A lot of people indicate that.
That's lies. But I've never withdrawn from heroin. I've never withdrawn from it. I've never.
By the way, Leo,
Keep it that way.
Leo, do you know what the main problem with SSRIs are? It's when, and this is actually, I've seen this firsthand. It's when patients, they'll typically increase the prescribed dose when they feel like the drug is not working fast enough. So, and some people combine them with other substances, right, like alcohol, so they can amplify the medication's effect. The issue here is a lot of these people getting prescribed these medications are individuals who suffer either from drug addiction or alcohol addiction, right? And they have other issues that exist in their lives that amplify the outcome of taking these drugs. Doctors, when you go to a doctor, he doesn't give a fuck about whether you're an alcoholic, whether you're a drug addict, whether you have other aspects of your life that's going to affect this. He'll just fucking prescribe it to you, just like with ADHD medication.
That's the
And
weird
that's a problem.
shit. Like, I can't understand why that.
You know
why
why?
it happens.
Doctors are not fucking invested in your life. When you go to a fucking doctor, and I don't know if this happens with other people, you want to get your physical done, he doesn't fucking care. He has 100, 300 other people that he's going to see in the next 2 hours, right? He wants to finish with you as fast as he can. He'll fucking talk to you, jiggle your balls a bit, ask you if you're doing okay. If you tell him that you can't focus, he'll suggest that he'll prescribe you ADHD medication to help out, and he'll prescribe it almost immediately if you want them. And
They
that's
just
actually,
don't have the time.
yeah, that
They just
happened
don't
with
have
me.
the time. Yeah.
I was surprised. I went into the doctor's office one day. I told him, he was just casually having a conversation with me about college. And I was like, I'm a bit stressed out and stuff. He looked at me. He was like, well, would you like me to prescribe you some antidepressants or
Oh my
ADHD
God.
medication? And I told him, dude, I'm just having a casual conversation. I thought everyone gets fucking stressed, right?
It's got hundreds of patients. Yeah.
We're looking for a cure, not a fix.
I was gonna say it might seem just like an Occam's razor situation, but that's definitely like, it's pretty disturbing that he's like, oh, you have an issue? Well, here you go, Zoloft. You need an antipsychotic? You think you're seeing things? Here you go.
Well, what I don't get, Cronus, is everything in your country it's all private, isn't it? So, like in the NHS, right, in the National Health Service in England, a doctor might prescribe a medication to a patient, but they should. What they're supposed to do is come and sort of consult a month later and see how the patient is getting on with this medication, right? But they don't do that because it's the NHS, right? There's way too many patients, especially with this pandemic going on. So what about in America? I mean, like, you don't have, like, your medical service is not it's not
It's very piecemeal, to be honest.
No, it's not. It's not. It's privatized, isn't it? It's private.
Look, you keep saying private, but I mean, in reality, these pharmaceutical companies and medical agencies, they work hand in hand with the politicians that regulate them, right? The reason a lot of these politicians get into politics to begin with and become successful politicians in the spots they're in is because they received financial help. And you already know who I'm going to tell you they're receiving the financial help from, right? So when these politicians are receiving financial help and donations from these very gracious pharmaceutical companies, these pharmaceutical companies expect something in return. Of course, this is not something that's a contract, a legal contract between the pharmaceutical companies and the politician, but they become friendly with each other, and that's actually what happens currently, right? The politicians will typically be less regulative when it comes to these companies, or they'll be more friendly when it comes to lawsuits being thrown at those companies and stuff like that. You get what I'm saying?
It
So
goes
if
as
I-
far as affecting curriculums, to the point where curriculums are affected by this medical school curriculums, to the point where they don't have access as much to information about epigenetics and the fact that the
I was in
environment
medical
has
school.
the fact that the environment has a stronger effect on your disposition than the environment has a stronger effect on that than
I was in medical school. I left. I mean, I didn't leave because I was failing. I was doing very well, right? I'm not bragging, but I left because, in my opinion, Western medicine has become a joke. First of all, second of all, I feel like medical schools in the U.S. are not properly preparing students to be legitimate doctors that want to treat people's main source of illnesses. If you come to me with an illness, I will try to find the core of that illness, right? I will try to treat you. So if you have a tumor, I will try to locate where the tumor is and perhaps suggest methods to remove the tumor instead of medicating you for the next 20, 30 years of your life. Same thing
Right.
with a lot of other illnesses.
Yeah, and what we're looking at here is type of consciousness healing at the level of one's own core of being, and that's not able to be packaged in a pill, unfortunately. But it can be pointed to with psychedelic rituals, and it's helped a lot of people thus far. And I think that's a way to bridge the gap.
Well, I mean, they're training doctors to help people cope with their illnesses using pills and medication rather than eliminate those illnesses to begin with than when they actually can.
Yeah.
For example, I don't think ADHD is an illness, right? I don't think that's something that requires medication. I believe that's a personality type. The only reason we put it as an illness is because teachers and adults in the school system are not well equipped and willing to be able to work with these type of personalities, right? Because they want to work with kids that are going to not give them a hard time. They don't get paid enough to deal with, kids that give them a hard time. So instead of, looking into these kids, investing more time into them because they actually can't, there's way too many other kids that they have to deal with. The simple solution is medicate your kid or I don't want him in my classroom. And that actually happened with me, unfortunately.
So it's like
Well, no, I'm saying it's I'm saying it's private, but it's in a way. I mean, politicians work hand in hand with these companies when they're supposed to be the ones regulating them. In reality, they're not really regulating them. They're giving them an easy time because they're the ones being paid by them to begin with.
Yeah.
No, you're going to get billed. In fact, you're probably going to get billed super heavily. The number one reason for bankruptcy in the United States are medical expenses.
The best way to describe it is as a private public cartel.
And by the way, I don't have a problem with the financial aspect of it. What I have a problem is if you go to get your leg fixed after they tape you all up and good, the doctor is going to go ahead and prescribe you a year supply of hydrocodone or oxycodone with 4 or 5 refills. That happens very often. Why would you need 5, 6 refills of hydrocodone, 90 days supply for a broken leg?
I
Right?
don't think they really do that, man.
No, I didn't say it wasn't private. I told you they work hand in hand with the government that's supposed to be regulating them.
It's a cartel, man. In a
Plus,
sense.
I don't think you understand that there's things that are subsidized within that system. It's not fully private. There's things that are subsidized. It's more complex than just saying it's private.
There's good subsidizations, but
It's
I'd
mostly
like to point
private.
out the good subsidizations would be like the orphan drug program. Lithium would be one example of an orphan drug that's extremely helpful to a lot of people. Yeah, so the orphan drug program is I'm not going to just paint it all with the swath that it's all bad, but yeah, we need to work on our perspective.
So in America, if you come to my pharmacy and you need medication or you're gonna die, we have to give you that medication, but you can't afford it, right? You can't afford the medication, but we have to give it to you, even though you can't pay for it. Well, now who's gonna pay for it? Right? It's a private institution. The pharmacy is private. Now it's subsidized. The government will subsidize a part of it in order to help you pay for it. The government regularly subsidizes medication for individuals with AIDS, cancer, life-threatening conditions that require them to get their medication or they will die. It's actually funny. People will tell you, I can't get medication. No, you're not gonna die. You just have to, if you're not making enough to be able to afford it, the government will help you subsidize it. You just have to do the paperwork.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. I don't think there could ever be like a fully private sector. Like, I don't think it's well. I think the government will always have to subsidize things for some people and intervene.
Should bring up mushrooms as the tail end of the podcast. They may have been around for longer than civilization. They may have influenced our spiritual development. It opens up new thought forms. May have led to glossalia. I'm on the edge when it comes to the stoned ape hypothesis, but it may have led to development of new thought forms and allows for a whole mind body healing in ways that are hard to fathom for those who haven't experienced it yet, but it's profoundly life changing in a positive way when done in the right environment and setting. I think that's why it's there's a lot of the clinical trials are led by psychiatrists, and that helps guide it in the right direction. But yeah, having a sitter is helpful. But these experiences are profoundly life changing for a lot of people and can help them in numerous ways.
I agree with that 100%. And I think this is a really good conversation about the benefits that some of these substances can have. Psilocybin, ketamine, to look into them as therapies.
Yeah,
But
as all, I'd like to close. As always, I urge one to do their own research. Treat this podcast as a starting point to dig into the literature on your own. And please, before trying anything, talk with a doctor about any potential unsafe interactions. Stay safe, learn, love, and grow. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Technoshaman. That was great. I appreciate it. And we'll get into these topics deeper over time. But for now, hopefully, at least research ketamine, psilocybin, ibogaine, these different things. So thanks very much, Technoshaman. Thank you, everyone who joined the podcast tonight. Again, find us on YouTube and BitChute. Over 200 episodes of the podcast there. And most of all, join the Roundtable Discord server where we do our daily podcast every day at 8 Central. And we'll do it tomorrow and the next day. So please join us then. And for us, for the rest of the night, let's jump up to Roundtable 1 in one of the other chats. Thank you, Saigo, for recording that. And I'll be in Roundtable 1.